The one thing you learn about life is that you can't have it all. There are trade-offs. This is especially true when you're a parent. I was talking once to the writer Austin Kleon. We both wrote books at the same time, but he had kids a little bit earlier than me. And the advice he gave me, he said, work, family, scene. Pick two. You could write, you could go to parties, but you would end up neglecting your spouse and your kids. If you wanted to have a good, stable family life and do great work, that was possible, but you were going to miss out on some cool stuff. You can't make time for it all. You can't do everything. You have to make trade-offs. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of The Daily Dad. We're going to talk about some important trade-offs that you have to make as a parent, but also that you get to make as a parent. King George VI, that's the father of Queen Elizabeth II, he met with his Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. So you might think that when Queen Elizabeth took over in 1952, she would continue this tradition. She is, after all, a traditionalist. But she didn't, because at the time, Queen Elizabeth had 2 young children, and every parent knows roughly 5:30 p.m. is dinner time, knocking on bath time, knocking on bedtime. And she wanted to avoid that painful question like, is mom gonna play with us tonight? Or why isn't mom gonna play with us tonight, as one of her biographer writes. So what Queen Elizabeth did was she moved that audience about 6:30 p.m., which allowed her to go into the nursery, to put them in their bath, and then tuck them into bed before she went and talked matters of state with Winston Churchill. The point is, when you have kids, you have to be willing to make adjustments. You're going to have to be willing to change things. You're going to have to be willing to move other people and other things around. And that your job should, in most cases, come second to your kids, right? Because our most important job is stuff like that, bedtime and bath time, and being there with them. If the Queen can put off Winston Churchill for an hour, I'm pretty sure that you can reschedule that conference call. If she can put her family first, then you can put your family first. Whatever business you're in, you can do that. For almost his whole career, Archie Manning, one of the great quarterbacks of all time, the father of Peyton and Eli, he was like the company man in New Orleans. He was on the New Orleans Saints. He was great. They were terrible. And they basically just lost year in and year out. He had poor offensive lines. They drafted poorly. They basically never even came close to playoff contention. When he was finally towards the end of his career traded to the Houston Oilers and then the Vikings, he would have been ecstatic. It would have been a blessing. It could have breathed new life into his career. This is his chance to win. This is his chance to go deep in the playoffs. This is his chance to get all the things that he hadn't gotten before, at least professionally. And he did. He had years left in him and was finally a part of a winning team. But that didn't last long. Instead, he retired in 1984. And the reason was his son, Eli. As Manning explains in this great book called My First Coach, which is all about the relationship between quarterbacks and their fathers, he says that he had sensed that his relationship wasn't quite the same with Eli that had been with his sons Cooper and Peyton at that age, because he was gone. His family still lived in New Orleans and he was with the team. He said that he just didn't like it. He said that he knew that when he retired, he could be home full time for his son. And so that's what he did. He cut his career short in the way that mothers have been doing for generations. He put his family first, because that's what great parenting, regardless of gender, looks like. That's real greatness. Plenty of people have won a lot of games or made a lot of money or done a lot of things professionally. But I would argue that far fewer have made impressive, expensive sacrifices like that. Looking back, would anyone have actually noticed 2 more seasons with the Vikings? Would that be what we're talking about? Is that so memorable? Maybe not. But I can tell you who definitely noticed that his dad was home, that his dad retired, that his dad made that choice. And that's Eli Manning, because he benefited unquestionably, immeasurably from his father's choice. And now he has a happy family and 2 Super Bowl victories to show for it. And so I think it's worth thinking about what it would look like, what kind of impact, what kind of difference it would make if we made more choices like that, if we actually put them ahead of everything else. You really can't know until you do it. And it is scary and it's challenging. It doesn't always feel like the right choice. It can feel irresponsible in some ways. With time, it almost always feels like it was the right choice. Donald Miller, the author, he's written a bunch of great books. He once was talking about how he built this office behind his house. And one of the things that struck him about that was that someday his daughter would look at it and think, that's where my dad worked to provide for us. And maybe she'd feel a little sentimental. But what he said he hopes she never thinks is, that's a place my dad loved more than me. I think it's sad to say there are kids that think that about their parents' professional athletics career, that think it about their parents' business, that think it about so many things, that my parents loved something more than me. It's like that very sad Tracy Chapman song about the dad that sees more of his friends than he does of his kids. And that is a reality because parents don't grow up, they don't make adult choices, they don't make those trade-offs. It happens. And we hear stuff like that, not just from deadbeats, but from children of great men and women. We hear it from Albert Einstein's son or Nelson Mandela's daughter. We hear it from kids who were presidents or kings or rock stars or CEOs. It's some version of my dad or my mom was there for so many people as part of their job, but they weren't there for me. That they were the best in the world at everything they did except being my parent. That's not what you want your kids to say. And that's heartbreaking. Because look, the world needs a Nelson Mandela. It needs Eleanor Roosevelt or Winston Churchill. It needs Albert Einstein. It needs great people at what they do. It is hard to be great at what you do without sacrifice. But this is true of being a parent too. That greatness can't come exclusively at the expense of our family. Sometimes being great at home has to come at the cost of leaving some stuff on the table at work. There really is no job, there's no career, there's no amount of responsibility that truly justifies being absent. You can be gone sometimes, but that's different than being absent or being deficient. Having that calling, achieving that success is great, but being important isn't going to change what your most important job is. Becoming a parent, being there for them. You might be one of the most important people in the whole world, but you are the whole world to your kids. And at some point, that time in the spotlight will be over. At some point, you will be looking back at the end of your life, and it's here that you're going to feel regret. It's here that you're going to feel like you left something on the table that you could have done better. So make those changes now. It is really not possible to be great at anything without struggle, and that is true for being a parent too. There's a story about Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female Supreme Court justice in the United States. She was at this event for female judges in the 1980s. A law professor raised her hand and said, Justice O'Connor, how do you take care of your family and have a career? O'Connor answered, you just always put your family first. And look, that is important. That's a great rule. But the reality is that every woman in that room, every trailblazer in that room would have understood that it was more complicated than that. As her biographer, Evan Thomas, would write, that everyone in the room knew that the real answer to that question was you can only do it by constant struggle, by painful choice, and by a lot of trade-offs. It is important, I think, that we're not flippant about this, that there is a tension, an inherent tension about caring and loving about your family and trying to achieve and do things for you and for them. Because look, if it was easy, every parent would just do it. If it was natural, if it was supported, if everyone appreciated it, we would all do it. But we don't, because it is hard, because it's confusing, because it's not always clear what the right thing is to do in the moment. And later, O'Connor would talk about how desperately hard it was to balance work and family. She would try to talk to her law clerks, whether they were male or female, about this struggle. And she tried not to dance around it. She wanted them to know it would be hard. It would be a challenge. You would feel torn in these different directions. The more upfront we are about that, the more open we can be about that, the more we can share our own struggles, our own regrets even. I wish I'd taken more time off when I'd had my kids. It seemed in the moment like I couldn't afford it, but in retrospect, I obviously could. There are meetings and phone calls and things that I did or I took, opportunities I jumped on that, again, in retrospect seem silly, but they felt like the right thing at the time. And so it's only in talking about that struggle and how you can feel pulled in a million different directions and how it can feel like you're doing the responsible thing when in fact you're doing the irresponsible thing and vice versa, that you can help people open up and ask for advice with their own struggles. Sean Lennon, who's the youngest son of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, grew up without a father. His father, John Lennon, was assassinated outside his New York City apartment when his son was just 5 years old. and how terrible and awful and painful that must have been. He did get a few short years with his father, and those years shaped him immensely. He's talked about his memories of his dad, how much he does remember from that time. So I thought it was interesting. I listened to an interview with Sean Lennon once, and he was explaining that on an almost daily basis, someone will come up to him and say something like, "You have no idea what your dad meant to me. You can't understand how important your dad's music is to me." But this always felt strange, Sean would explain, because he says he absolutely understands that his father and his father's music are even more important in his life because John Lennon was Sean Lennon's father. And they spent 5 real years together. He's been holding on to every memory and every sense memory, every moment, every photograph, every video, every minute of that relationship since he lost his father. Because his dad's music, because the Beatles are the only way that he gets to talk to his father and his father gets to talk to him. And I think we should all take that to heart. Even the greatest musician of all time is more important as a parent to their children than as an artist to the world. And the same is true for you, whether you sell insurance or stocks or are a head of state. It really doesn't matter how great our work is, how wealthy it makes us, how many people it impacts. Even if it impacts billions of people, it's almost certainly not going to eclipse the direct impact that we have on our kids. We could mean so much to the world. At the end of the day, we are our kids' whole world. And we have to make our decisions and our choices accordingly. You'll get asked this question. People will say, "Hey, can I pick your brain for a minute?" Or, "Hey, can I get a few minutes from you? Hey, can you look at this for me?" People ask for stuff. That's fine, but I think sometimes we're not aware of what they are asking from us, what they are taking from us. Seneca said you could ask the wisest minds of all time and they would have trouble coming up with an explanation for why people are protective of money and property, but not of their time. And I think it's really important as a parent that you realize that when someone is picking your brain, they're picking your pocket. They're also stealing time from your family. There's a story about Kobe Bryant, a reporter shared after his death, that, she'd asked him if he wanted to be interviewed for this piece. And he said, "Hey, my girls are keeping me busy. I'm heads down. I can't do it." And he died shortly thereafter. It's only the starkness of his almost immediate death that puts it into contrast, that when we are agreeing to do stuff that we don't need to do, when we're letting people take stuff from us, when we're observing various social niceties for no real reason because we don't want to seem rude, we are in fact being rude. We're being rude to our family. We promised the bulk of our time to these people that we brought into the world. That's who we owe not being rude to, first and foremost. That's whose feelings we should not want to hurt. That's who we don't want to be rude to. But we're happy to go, "Hey, I'm going to be home late tonight," or "Hey, sorry, I won't be able to see you tomorrow," or "Hey, I'm going to be gone on your birthday," or whatever it is. We're more inclined to say that sometimes than we are to say, "Sorry, I can't. Sorry, I'm too busy. Sorry, I've got a baby at home. Sorry, I'd just rather be with my family." I have a sign in my office that says no. It's a reminder to say no, and it is between 2 pictures of my kids. And it is a reminder that when I am saying yes to things, I am also saying no to these 2 people. And conversely, when I say no, which I'm trying to remind myself to do more, I am saying yes to these 2 people. So who do you owe your time to? Who do you give the bulk of your time to? Who do you give your best time to? It's a shame that we are so frivolous and free with our time, and then our family, our kids, they get the leftover. We give the best years of our kids' lives to things that we won't even remember in a few years. We will, at some point in the future, be willing to trade everything for one more minute, one more second with them. What we would kill to go back to having them be a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, to be at Disneyland with them at that age again. And here we are right now in this moment, throwing it away like it's nothing. There's a story about the late and great ESPN broadcaster Stuart Scott. He was the father of 2 young girls. He's sitting in a restaurant with some friends and their children. They're all having one of those, great Saturday or Sunday breakfasts. Everyone's having fun. The kids are behaving. The dads are there. Everyone's just having a great time. And then a well-meaning mom walks by, and recognizing Scott, she says, "Hey, it's so awesome to see you babysitting your kids." And I think most dads have heard some version of this, or maybe have even said it themselves. "Oh, I'm babysitting the kids tonight," or some version of that. What's horrendous about that is the implication that you're not a primary or equal caregiver, that you are not a parent, that you are just a person who occasionally watches this kid on behalf of the actual parent. No, that's you. You don't call a homeowner a security guard. You're not house sitting your own house. These are your kids. You can't be babysitting his own behalf. That's insane. There's that expression about the soft bigotry of low expectations, that you congratulate a father for being with their kids and then patronize them by saying that they're babysitting. No, you're doing your job. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're doing what you like doing, what is important to you to do. Stuart Scott was doing his job. You are doing your job, no more, no less. And that's what a friend who witnessed the scene would say, that he never saw himself as an occasional parental figure who took the kids off mom's hands. No, you want to be involved in your kid's life. You want to be a main figure in your life. You want to do your job, fulfill your role as an equal parent. Because what you do is important. It is important, and you should treat it as such. Even a parent who makes the right trade-offs most of the time is still going to fall short. We're going to screw up. We're going to make mistakes. And this is actually a story that I tell in The Daily Dad. Queen Elizabeth famously moves her nightly meeting with Winston Churchill back an hour because it was more important to her to have bedtime and bath time with her kids than it was to do the affairs of state. That's impressive. That's awesome. But there's also a terribly sad story about Queen Elizabeth. She'd just been gone for 6 months. Imagine how tough that would be, but how common that was. And this is a time before FaceTime or Zoom. She hasn't seen her kids in 6 months, and she pulls up to England in the royal yacht. You can imagine how excited her kids were to see her, how excited she must have been to see them. She probably had presents. They were dying for the presents. They'd grown so much. You know what reunions are like. Even when it's just been a long day at school, you know how much anticipation can build up. But 6 months. And so as Prince Charles rushes towards his mother, his mom, who was a stickler for protocol and was, of course, at work, as the Queen always was, she stops and greets these dignitaries first, as protocol dictated. And so she found herself saying to her son, "No, not you, dear." She wanted to do this work thing before she embraced her family. And all these decades later, as much as we can say it was a different time, there's something terribly sad and tragic about that, especially when you know that she knew better, having moved that meeting with Churchill and actually said, "No, my kids first and not you, dear," to Churchill. The idea that what we are so often saying to our kids is, "No, not you, dear. No, I have to do this conference call. No, I have to go to this meeting. No, I'm going to go to this concert. No, we're saying, "No, not you." And so often what we are saying yes to is silly. Apparently, Prince Charles, now the King of England, actually titled one of the chapters of his memoir, "No, Not You, Dear." So it was such a scarring event. And I think understandably so. And it's scarring for our kids too. It's scarring for our kids too, when we choose things over them that in the big scheme of things seem terribly, terribly unimportant. Look, we make trade-offs all the time with our kids. I think about, I'm putting my kids down to bed, something I won't get to do forever, and I'm not fully present for it because I'm thinking about what I have to do next or what I want to do next. And that's why maybe you find yourself rushing through it or rushing along. No, I'm not going to read you another story. Hey, no, it's time for bed. No, I'm not going to get you another glass of water. It's time for bed. You're rushing through this thing. What are we rushing towards? I think it's worth pointing out we're rushing towards never getting to do it again because we don't get to do it forever. But when I step back and go, what did I do last night after I put my kids down? I answered email, sat on the couch, scrolled my phone. In retrospect, so much of what we trade off, what we trade our kids for, is not that important. It doesn't hold up. It's not even things we really want to do in the first place. And so realizing what you are choosing over your kids, like, hey, you could be here for this thing, for this school recital, for this car ride, for this conversation, for whatever it is. And what are you choosing? You're choosing to worry about politics. You're choosing to ruminate on some grudge. You're choosing to fantasize about what you're going to do later. You are trading away this thing you have in front of you right now, this thing that in the future you would do anything to get again. You are trading it away for nothing, or worse than nothing. Flea is one of the greatest musicians of all time. His band, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, has sold millions and millions of albums. They tour all over the world. They're also pretty notorious partiers. And although Flea didn't have the same substance abuse issues as, at least to the degree that his other bandmates did, at some point a few years ago, he finally got sober. He said the reason he got sober is he was having a conversation with a friend. His daughter was like 4 or something like that, and he would never do drugs or drink around her, but when he was on the road or when he was at a party, he would say that. He's like, oh, I just don't do it around my kid. Or maybe you've said something, I don't do that around my kids. What the friend pointed out, it's a great point. They said, look, all that matters is that you're available to your kids, that you have to be available to your kids always. And it struck Flea that he could be drinking, he could be partying, and his daughter could call. Or even just from like an energies perspective, just that she's over here on this level and he's over here in this distant other place for no reason. It hit him that his spirit, as well as his cognitive facilities, had to always be on call. Like a doctor or a pilot would say, I can't drink tonight. I'm flying tomorrow, or I'm doing surgery tomorrow. And he sort of realized that that's how we have to be as a parent, and not just physically when we're in the room, that we should have all our faculties about us. We should be available, communicative always. And that we should think about the things that get between us and that. We should think about the trade-offs we make, the things that prevent us from fully being there, the things that prevent us from being fully present. It is about physically being there, turning down the opportunity, not going to the place, not traveling. Maybe you do have to do that. But if you are going to do that, you have to mentally and spiritually be there. I think a lot when I'm on the road, even if I am in some distant time zone, I want to be very aware of what time zone they're in and what the rhythm of their day is. At some point, it was rude to just call my wife because it was a convenient time for me, but what I'm interrupting is getting ready or going to sleep, or it's some kind of downtime. I needed to call on the way to school. I wanted to call and check in on the way home from school. Technology allows me to access, but I have to be on the same wavelength too. I can't exist in my own world. And I think that's the lesson that Flea was learning. You have to be available for your kids, and the choices we make need to keep us available to them always. I struggle with all these things. I am not perfect at them, but I do. I try to say no a lot. And I've said no to cool stuff. I've said no to the Super Bowl. I've said no to exotic trips. I've said no to lots of money. I don't regret any of that. I do regret things that I have missed out on. So as you're weighing things, think about that. Think about how in the future, almost certainly, you will not regret what you missed out on professionally, but you will regret what you missed out on personally. So people who know me know it's hard to make plans with me. I'm tough to get a hold of. I can take a while to respond to things. That's because I prioritize something else. I prioritize someone else. I don't regret that. And I fully understand the consequences, the trade-offs that go along with that. And so should you. If you want to get better at your most important job, I send out one piece of parenting advice every single day. That's the Daily Dad newsletter. It's followed by hundreds of thousands of parents all over the world. It's totally free, no spam. You can sign up right now for free at dailydad.com.